A traffic stop near a state border becomes a full-blown biological impossibility within seconds, and by the time doctors finish running one simple blood test, an elaborate fabrication constructed over the better part of a year collapses entirely. This is a case where cold, hard laboratory science tore apart a lie so intricate it fooled an entire family, an entire community, and nearly an entire hospital system. What officers discovered on the shoulder of that highway wasn't just disturbing, it was scientifically contradictory, and untangling how that contradiction came to exist reveals one of the most calculated and horrifying deceptions ever documented. Before we dive in, a quick note. Your likes, subscriptions, and comments are what make these deep dive investigations possible. If you enjoy content like this, consider supporting the channel. Don't forget to drop your thoughts in the comments as we go. I always read them carefully. The morning of the 9th of October 2020, along a stretch of highway straddling the border between Texas and Oklahoma, a state trooper spots a Toyota Corolla swerving unpredictably between lanes. The driving is so erratic that at highway speed, the vehicle actually collides with a hawk in mid-flight, the bird becoming lodged in the front grille. Only after that impact does the car finally veer onto the shoulder and brake to a stop. The officer approaches the driver's side window, and what greets him instantly escalates this from a routine traffic stop into a full emergency response. The woman behind the wheel is drenched in blood from head to toe. Resting motionless on her lap is a newborn infant, completely silent. The umbilical cord remains uncut, simply shoved haphazardly into the waistband of her leggings. She screams that she gave birth roughly 35 minutes earlier, mid-drive, yet simultaneously refuses any medical intervention and rejects transport to the nearest Texas hospital. Instead, she demands, forcefully, that officers escort her across the state line into Idabel, Oklahoma, insisting her husband is already waiting there. Purely by chance, an off-duty nurse happens to be driving past at that exact moment. Spotting the emergency unfolding on the shoulder, she pulls over immediately. Noticing the infant has already turned blue, she begins CPR without hesitation. Paramedic Elton Crossland arrives shortly afterwards. While the medical team desperately fights to revive the newborn, the driver's behavior stuns everyone present. Rather than watching the resuscitation attempt unfold, she reaches for a bottle of water and a towel, and with visible irritation, begins wiping blood off her own legs, complaining aloud about how messy she'd become. As paramedics conduct a closer examination of the infant, the first red flags start appearing in their assessment. The baby's body temperature is startlingly cold. There's no trace whatsoever of the waxy protective vernix coating typically present on newborns immediately following birth. Even more damning, the blood and fluid coating the infant's skin have already fully dried. Any trained medical responder reaches the same immediate conclusion. This delivery did not occur 35 minutes prior, and it certainly didn't happen inside that driver's seat. The woman claims her due date had been September 30th, yet the calendar reads October 9th, meaning logically this should be a full-term or overdue infant. Instead, medical personnel are holding what appears to be a premature baby. Inside the ambulance, as staff cut away her blood-soaked leggings, the placenta drops onto the floor. Even confronted with this, she refuses to abandon her account, continuing to insist the birth happened spontaneously while driving, even as medical personnel change her into a fresh hospital gown. One detail immediately raises suspicion. That clean gown had already been packed and sitting on the front passenger seat before help ever arrived. Under police escort, she's transported to an Oklahoma emergency room, where the on-call OBGYN takes over the examination. The physical exam reveals zero tearing, no microscopic trauma, and none of the expected uterine changes consistent with recent childbirth. To resolve the question definitively through science, the doctor orders blood work testing for human chorionic gonadotropin, the pregnancy hormone that remains at elevated, detectable levels for weeks following delivery. The lab results obliterate her entire narrative. There's absolutely no trace of that hormone present in her bloodstream whatsoever. The medical evidence is unambiguous. This woman had never been pregnant, and biologically speaking, she could not possibly have given birth. What remains are simply the facts: an unresponsive, blue-tinted newborn, dried blood throughout the interior of that Toyota, and a woman whose entire account has just been scientifically obliterated. If pregnancy and childbirth are conclusively ruled out, one question becomes unavoidable. Whose child was she carrying down that highway? To answer that, the timeline needs to rewind 5 full years back to where this entire nightmare actually originates. Back in 2015, this same woman, Taylor Parker, is hospitalized following an ectopic pregnancy requiring emergency surgical intervention. Doctors perform a complete hysterectomy, permanently removing her uterus. Her medical file establishes an irreversible fact from that point forward. Parker physically loses any capacity to ever carry a pregnancy again. That detail is later independently confirmed by both her mother and multiple former husbands. Several years later, Taylor crosses paths with Wade Griffin at a Texas rodeo, an ordinary roofing crew foreman. Before long, Parker begins fabricating an entirely fictional backstory for herself, claiming she's heir to both the Morton Salt fortune and the Blackburn family estate. To lend credibility to that fiction, she forges financial documents, writing fraudulent bank checks totaling $150,000 that she proudly displays to Wade. She then creates multiple fake email accounts pretending to belong to wealthy, powerful relatives who don't actually exist, using those accounts to send herself fabricated correspondence, simulating ongoing business and family communication. When Wade eventually starts questioning why the promised inheritance never materializes, Taylor escalates her fabrication further, claiming she's now being actively hunted by hired assassins connected to a Mexican drug cartel. Examining this escalating pattern of deception raises an obvious question. Why didn't a grown adult male spend even 5 minutes verifying any of these outlandish claims online? Yet interview records confirm plainly that Griffin never once questioned anything she told him. Before long, Parker advances to the next stage of her scheme, announcing to Wade that she's pregnant. Since actually carrying a pregnancy is medically impossible for her, she purchases a realistic silicone pregnancy prosthetic online for $130, a kit including multiple inserts designed to simulate progressive stages of pregnancy, allowing her appearance to convincingly change month by month. Simultaneously, Taylor acquires counterfeit ultrasound images and fabricated positive pregnancy test results, printing them out to show Wade as supposed proof. To fully cement the illusion for everyone in their social circle, she arranges a professional maternity photo shoot during the peak of summer heat and even throws an elaborate gender reveal celebration. Within their own home, Taylor exercises absolute control over the narrative, strictly forbidding Wade from ever touching her stomach, claiming intense fear that any physical pressure might harm their unborn son or trigger pregnancy complications. Griffin accepts this explanation completely, maintaining physical distance throughout what he genuinely believes to be an actual pregnancy. Then, in spring 2020, hospitals nationwide implement strict pandemic-related visitor restrictions, and Parker immediately recognizes how perfectly these new rules serve her deception. On days corresponding to her supposed prenatal appointments, Wade dutifully drives her to a women's health clinic, but remains waiting in the parking lot, since hospital policy at the time prohibits visitors from entering examination rooms alongside patients. As a direct result, Griffin never once speaks with an actual physician and never once views an ultrasound screen. Every single update regarding this fictional pregnancy flows exclusively through Taylor. This elaborate deception drags on for an astonishing 10 months. Eventually, Wade's own relatives begin noticing the timeline simply doesn't logically add up. His mother learns about Taylor's prior hysterectomy through mutual acquaintances and directly informs her son that Parker cannot possibly be pregnant. Taylor immediately counters by accusing his entire family of spreading malicious lies, successfully turning Wade against his own relatives. Ultimately, he severs all contact with his family, becoming completely isolated and leaving Parker as his sole source of information. At this point, the pressure mounts significantly. A fabricated pregnancy cannot sustain itself indefinitely, and her invented due date has already passed without incident. Wade's family has been successfully eliminated from the equation. Parker now requires one critical element above all else: an actual living newborn infant to make her elaborate fiction appear genuine. To accomplish that, she needs access to a real expectant mother. Her attention subsequently shifts toward 21-year-old Reagan Hancock. Reagan resides in the small Texas town of New Boston, building a quiet life alongside her young daughter Kinley, actively involved in her local cowboy church, and preparing to marry her fiancé Homer. Taylor methodically inserts herself into Reagan's personal life step by step, volunteering to serve as her wedding photographer, an ideal role for establishing trust, since a photographer has legitimate reason to remain present throughout every significant moment of the celebration. Shortly following the wedding, Reagan announces she's expecting a son, with doctors projecting a November due date. The instant Taylor learns this information, she carefully realigns the timeline of her own fictional pregnancy to synchronize precisely with Reagan's genuine one. The two women begin communicating with increasing regularity, exchanging messages about purchasing diapers and infant formula while discussing preparations for their supposedly simultaneous new arrivals. Taylor repeatedly shows Reagan her steadily growing silicone belly prosthetic and shares fabricated ultrasound printouts as though they were authentic. Examining this particular phase of the evidence repeatedly raises an unsettling question. How does anyone recognize danger when it's disguised as something so completely mundane? Most people anticipate threats arriving through obvious hostility from strangers. Instead, here the threat is someone casually seated on the future victim's couch, sipping morning coffee, exhibiting no visible aggression whatsoever, simply engaged in calculated information gathering while maintaining the facade of a supportive friend. By October 8th, mounting pressure reaches a critical breaking point. Parker begins actively searching for a random potential target, driving to a local women's health clinic where she sits on an exterior bench for exactly 2 hours. Investigators would later recover a compiled list of license plate numbers from her phone, revealing she had been systematically tracking vehicles belonging to women visiting that clinic. That particular scheme ultimately falls apart for one straightforward reason. Nearly every expectant mother exits the building accompanied by a husband, partner, or family member, making a daylight attack surrounded by witnesses simply impractical. That leaves Reagan as Taylor's only remaining viable option. Later that same day, October 8th, Parker casually visits Reagan Hancock's home, the two women spending peaceful time together inside the nursery, sorting through baby clothing together. The night before executing her plan, Parker faces one final logistical obstacle. She needs to cancel the fabricated delivery she'd promised Wade was imminent. Taylor downloads a voice-altering application and places an anonymous call to a regional hospital, falsely reporting a bomb threat inside the building. The hospital immediately initiates a full security lockdown response, and by morning, Taylor possesses the perfect cover story, explaining why doctors supposedly couldn't admit her for delivery. With this additional buffer of time secured, Parker doesn't sleep at all that night. Her digital browsing history throughout those hours reveals highly targeted internet research, watching instructional videos demonstrating cesarean section procedures, and studying medical guidance on resuscitating premature infants. At that point, her plan shifts into full operational motion. The morning of October 9th begins with methodical isolation tactics. Before dawn breaks, Taylor initiates the active phase of her scheme, first working to remove Wade from the area entirely to secure complete freedom of action. Using a number masking application, Parker sends Wade a text message disguised as a customer inquiry, urgently requesting delivery of 150 wild hogs to a remote ranch location in Oklahoma. Completely unaware of the deception, Wade departs on what becomes a 4-hour drive, effectively clearing the area of his presence. At 7:50 that morning, Reagan's husband Homer departs for his workplace. Taylor is already positioned nearby, quietly observing him leave. Once inside the house, her immediate first action is confiscating Reagan's phone, buying herself critical time while ensuring Homer has no reason to suddenly return home unexpectedly. Using Reagan's own device, Taylor sends Homer a sequence of text messages, claiming Reagan has grown exhausted with their marriage, that their relationship has reached an irreparable breaking point, and that she's demanding an immediate divorce. Startled by this abrupt shift in tone, Homer attempts clarification through text messaging but remains at his job. In an era dominated by smartphones, enormous trust gets placed in whatever appears on a screen. A message arrives seemingly from a spouse, and nobody pauses to question who's actually typing it. It represents a nearly perfect form of digital manipulation. Between 9:14 and 9:26 that morning, cell tower records establish an undeniable fact. Taylor's primary phone, her separate burner device, and Reagan's phone all simultaneously begin moving away from the residence, traveling in identical directions. Parker subsequently destroys Reagan's phone entirely, eliminating that digital trail completely. Then, at 9:43 a.m., pure chance intervenes and changes everything. A neighbor across the street notices the Hancock family's Labrador running loose along the road and observes the garage door standing partially open. She immediately texts Homer, Alarmed, he begins repeatedly calling Reagan at 9:58, 10:02, 10:04, and 10:06, receiving no answer whatsoever. Increasingly panicked, he asks the neighbor to physically check the house. At approximately 10:15 a.m., Reagan's mother, Jessica, walks inside. The living room floor is completely covered in blood. 21-year-old Reagan has lost her life, and her newborn son has been forcibly extracted from her body. The only other family member remaining inside is 3-year-old Kinley, Reagan's older daughter, found in profound shock but physically uninjured. Jessica immediately calls emergency services, and this becomes the precise moment when the dispatcher makes the critical connection, linking this newborn report to another emergency call received barely an hour earlier, describing a blood-covered woman stopped on the highway with a newborn infant in her vehicle. The pieces suddenly align completely. For investigators, this represents the decisive breakthrough. There's no need to launch an extensive manhunt. Their primary suspect is already sitting in custody. The investigation immediately pivots toward the crime scene in New Boston. The initial responding officers encounter such an overwhelming scene that detectives must actively restrain some of their own colleagues from moving too hastily. While Homer grants consent to search the residence, the lead investigator makes a firm procedural call. The scene remains completely untouched until an official search warrant is secured, since even a single procedural misstep could jeopardize the entire prosecution. Valuable hours are consequently lost, though security footage from Homer's workplace conclusively establishes his ironclad alibi. The house is formally sealed, and from that point forward, the investigation belongs entirely to the forensic team. The moment crime scene investigators enter the Hancock residence, they immediately eliminate any possibility of domestic conflict or self-defense. The destruction throughout the living room indicates a deliberate, methodical assault. Across countless documented criminal investigations, emotionally driven violence is common, but what distinguishes this particular case is the extraordinary level of premeditation and calculated intent behind every single action taken. Forensic examination ultimately documents over 100 sharp force injuries across Reagan's body, alongside 39 separate blunt force impacts to her skull. The weapon responsible turns out to be a heavy glass jar, weighing approximately 4.5 pounds, filled with decorative pink and blue sand, a cherished wedding keepsake previously displayed within the Hancock home. Taylor wielded it as one weapon during the assault, but the truly significant detail lies buried within the pattern of injuries themselves. Among more than 100 documented sharp force wounds, not a single one struck Reagan's abdominal region. Every injury remains concentrated exclusively across her head, neck, and upper chest. Parker operated with almost surgical precision, deliberately protecting the one element she considered her actual objective, the unborn infant. To extract the baby, Taylor employed a veterinary scalpel she'd brought specifically for that purpose. Forensic investigators later recover a snapped fragment of that thin blade lodged within Reagan's neck. Following the extraction, the attacker inflicted a deep laceration extending from ear toward throat, an action bearing absolutely no connection to delivering the infant. It existed purely to guarantee the victim wouldn't survive the encounter. As the medical examiner reviewed complete autopsy findings, one particular detail emerged as most significant of all. Microscopic fragments of Reagan's own uterine tissue were discovered lodged beneath her fingernails, indicating she remained conscious considerably longer than investigators initially believed. Even as she hemorrhaged blood, this young mother continued fighting until her absolute final moments, using her bare hands in a desperate attempt to hold herself together while protecting her daughter. The most devastating detail is that throughout this entire brutal assault, 3-year-old Kinley remained hidden beneath a blanket in an adjacent room, hearing everything unfold while somehow remaining completely undetected. Once Parker completes her horrific objective, she encounters an unexpected complication. The living room floor is saturated with blood, the struggle having been so violent that investigators would later need to collect responding officers' footwear, specifically to distinguish their footprints from those left by the actual attacker. If Taylor exited wearing her own blood-soaked sandals, she'd leave an evidentiary trail leading directly back to herself. She makes a coldly calculated decision, removing her bloodied sandals and abandoning them at the scene, then locating a clean pair of Reagan's own sneakers to wear as she walks out of the house entirely. Months later, those discarded sandals become one of the most compelling pieces of physical evidence in the entire case. Prosecutors need definitive proof that the bloody footprints across the tile floor originated from that specific pair. Investigators successfully locate an identical model listed on eBay, then within a forensic laboratory setting, recreate the exact flooring pattern from the Hancock home, coat it with donor blood, and have an investigator walk across it wearing matching sandals. The resulting tread pattern proves a perfect match. Science relies exclusively on documented evidence, never on constructed narratives. In fall 2022, the trial finally commences. Taylor's defense team attempts sparing her from potential capital punishment by advancing an argument that visibly shocks the courtroom, claiming that legally one cannot kidnap someone already deceased, arguing the infant had never actually been born alive. However, medical documentation completely demolishes that defense strategy. When infant Braxlyn Sage arrived at the hospital, physicians documented a heart rate of 58 beats per minute, conclusively proving she remained alive at the moment she was forcibly removed from the house. What proves particularly remarkable is Taylor's demeanor throughout the entire trial proceedings. One might reasonably expect visible tears or genuine remorse. Instead, Parker arrives in court wearing a face mask decorated with sunflower patterns, deliberately mirroring the exact floral theme that had been central to Reagan's own wedding celebration. Even confined within jail, the defendant continues actively constructing new manipulative schemes, soliciting wealthy potential supporters through written correspondence, offering fabricated confessions in exchange for personal favors, and even attempting to recruit false witnesses for a payment of $500, concealing her detailed instructions within the margins of ordinary Sudoku puzzle books.